Some people learn how to become teachers in a classroom. They have a degree in education. There's one type of teaching and learning that's really hard to learn about in a classroom, and that is experiential learning. Experiential learning could kind of be tied to this trend of unschooling. It's like a non-traditional method of teaching and learning, but when you think about it, it makes the most sense. It's like the real way that we learn, the organic or natural way. Here's how I learned about experiential learning. First up, my first year of college, art school in Baltimore, I had a class called Finding Baltimore. Yes, we were in a classroom half of the time, but the other half of the time, every other day, we wandered around Baltimore. There are so many really different neighborhoods in Baltimore. It's like a patchwork quilt. There's communities from all over the world. And part of what we were doing was walking through these neighborhoods, learning about them through looking, talking to people, business owners, homeowners, people in cafes, people in schools, other organizations. And we would bring all of that information that we gathered back to the classroom and think about social dynamics and maybe problems that could be solved in creative ways because we were creative thinkers. So that is experiential learning experience number one for me. And number two was when I studied abroad with the School of International Training. SIT has a program in Durban, South Africa called Social and Political Transformation. And part of SIT's teaching philosophy is experiential learning. So again, we spent a lot of time in a classroom doing traditional book learning and discussion, but we also wandered around the neighborhoods of Durban. I remember going into a casino and talking with people there, wandering through markets, going into businesses and talking to people around the city. Everywhere we went throughout South Africa, it was very important to be in the communities that we were learning about and learn from the people in those communities, first person information. So that was experiential learning number two for me. When I became a teacher, I wanted to create these learning experiences for my students, but how hard is that in a public school K through 12 classroom? Very hard. It's like a locked campus, right? You cannot leave. One way that I did that, especially at an elementary school that I was at, was gardens. We were very lucky to have a few little gardens and pagodas throughout the school. Once it was just a little field with a tree. And in art education, it's very easy to fit whatever you want to do into the curriculum. So I would take kindergartners all the way through fifth graders outside to draw from life instead of drawing from reference images that they would look at sitting at a table in a classroom. At a high school, I did this with photography. If you teach any subject, you could probably figure out a way to swing this. You could facilitate a field trip. Now, I know that field trips are like impossible in public schools. There's so much paperwork, so many steps. Sometimes it costs money, which is impossible to come by, and it sometimes requires parent help, which can be impossible to come by. So I created the easiest field trip ever. Of course, in all of the early field trips that I tried to make happen, I messed up so many steps because there's like 15 steps. But this easy field trip was just a walk off campus. We wandered around the neighborhood that our school was in. This was a warehouse neighborhood mostly. We took photographs. This neighborhood was a food desert, and we were also learning about that. There's corner stores instead of grocery stores. And we eventually brought information from our photography walk into this food desert project that turned into a printmaking project. So yeah, I turned in all the paperwork and we walked out of those gates and wandered the neighborhood together. And that was one way that I made experiential learning happen in a K through 12 classroom.